This podcast contains paid advertisements, but more on that later. Welcome to the O'Connor Bootstrap podcast, where I discuss how you can grow your business by the bootstraps. This applies to everyone with an entrepreneurial spirit. That includes bootstrappers just starting out, established business owners, and business leaders. My goal is to help you grow both personally and professionally. I'm your host, Isaiah O'Connor. Today's sponsor is the sponsor that literally helped change my life and make me into the man I am today, and that is Audible.com. Now, how did Audible change my life? Quite simple. I was stuck in a dead-end job in a country in which I was not fluent in the language, working prepping vegetables as a cook, not a chef, just an everyday cook that did everyday cooking at minimum wage, or as close to minimum wage as they have here in Norway. And while I was doing that out of frustration, wanting to find a better job, looking for a better job, trying to figure out a way to get out of that place, in sheer desperation, I had remembered hearing a book titled 48 Days to the Work You Love, mentioned by a podcast and radio show I listened to, the Dave Ramsey Show, and I decided to give it a go. And being a huge fan of Audible for years even before that, I decided to go ahead and go download the book 48 Days to the Work You Love, which is the book, of course, I'm recommending today. In that book, it talks about not just how to find a job, not just the ways to do a step-by-step job search, the best way to actually find great jobs, get job offers, and then land the job, interviewing tips and all that good stuff to find a job. That was all in there, and it's all very well and good and very important if you want to find a job. So if you happen to stumble across my podcast and just listen to it out of idle curiosity, and you're not the entrepreneur type, and you're not the leadership type, that's absolutely fine. I mean, my focus is entrepreneurs and leaders and bootstrappers and startups. That's great. But if you're not that type, you don't have any ambition to start your own thing, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, and you need a good job. I highly recommend this book. If you're an entrepreneur and you are a startup leadership type, I also highly recommend this book, because the core focus of this book is something that I strongly believe in and have had actually several episodes before on, and that is you need to focus on finding the person you are and the way you can best serve society in a way that makes you find your true calling. And if you find your true calling, or in more common terms, your true vocation, then they say, of course, the line is, if you find your vocation, true vocation, you're on vacation the rest of your life. So listening to this book, making me think about all the jobs I've had in the past, the different types of experiences, the leadership, the positions, management positions, customer service, whatever. I realized that one of the things it talked about was starting up on your own. I realized I really had this entrepreneurial bend in me where I've tried to start up things several times before with no great success, admittedly, but it inspired me to try yet again. And doing that, being able to listen while working, because obviously I couldn't sit down at my job and read through a book, so I was able to put it on speaker and just listen as I worked. That gave me the opportunity to, and encouraged me to start my own business on the side, which is what led me to building up my business and then wind up doing this podcast. So it's an amazing book. Audible, that's the best part about audiobooks in general, which is you can listen while you're doing other stuff. Even if you're really busy, you can get information that can change your life. It did with me. And of course, why Audible? Well, Audible has the largest repository of audio content than any other place in the world. Mostly books, They also have lectures and podcasts and a lot of other different things built into Audible that makes it really easy. Plus, the Audible player is amazing. You can bookmark. Of course, you can pause, but you can jump back 10, 30 seconds. You can adjust it. You can actually tweak with the settings, which is cool. So if you want to be able to jump back 10 seconds, if you miss something, and jump forward 30 seconds, you can do that too. You can adjust it. But the player is amazing. It's very easy to use. Cross-platform. You're chapter 25 on a long book like The Count of Monte Cristo, and you go on your computer and you want to listen on your computer, you can just switch and it will pick up right where you left off. It's amazing. But that's why I chose Audible. And audio books, audio information can change your life because you can listen when you're otherwise busy. And of course, since I highly recommend 48 Days to the Work You Love, Audible being our sponsor today, you can go and get a free trial over at audible.com/bootstrap with a capital B. That's audible.com/bootstrap with a capital B. You get a free trial. If you do the $14.95 free trial, you get one audiobook for free that you keep forever. You get 2 Audible originals for free, you keep forever. And you also get access to their entire listening library that you can listen to unlimited during that month. There's no commitment. You can keep the book after the month right away, but you won't want to quit because it's amazing and it's only $14.95 a month. Really, really worth it. Go check it out, audible.com/bootstrap with a capital B. So today I'm going to be talking about 2 principles that are kind of in conflict and contrast, but things I think both really do occur in business quite often, in organizations, very, very often. And I've seen it myself. I've suffered myself because of it. And I think this is an important principle to know when it comes to leadership. And by the way, this is part of the leadership series. And today I'm going to be talking about the Peter principle and the Dilbert principle. And they're kind of the same end result, but for different reasons. And I'll go into that. Let's start with the Peter principle. I'm going to read from Wikipedia what the Peter principle is. Now, I know, Wikipedia is not always the most accurate source of information. I understand that. However, when it comes to just a book summary, yeah, you're usually pretty safe. So, let's read. The Peter Principle is a concept in management developed by Lawrence J. Peter, which observes that people in a hierarchy tend to rise to the level of incompetence. Employees are promoted based on their success in previous jobs until they reach a level at which they are no longer competent, as skills in one job do not necessarily translate to another. The concept was explained in the book The Peter Principle by Dr. Peter and Raymond Hull. And even says the book was intended to be satire because it became popular as it was seen to make a serious point about the shortcomings of how people are promoted within hierarchical organizations. Hull wrote the text based on Peter's research. The Peter Principle has been the subject of much subsequent commentary and research. Now, enough with the Wikipedia on that. There is a good point here, and with this point, I've seen it. This happens quite often in organizations where a person who's hyper competent in one job, in their main job, they're the best person ever in that job. And because they're so incredibly good and they're so incredibly productive and they're such an amazing employee, you have to recognize them somehow. So you promote them up into a different position. And they might even do that decently well enough. And so because they're competent at that one, you promote them again. And they're maybe okay at that job, but they're decent enough. They do the job. You promote them one more time, and they just suck at that job. You can't promote them. You can't demote them because they're still a great employee, and they're just kind of stuck in a limbo of incompetence, which can cause your whole company to suffer, which I've seen time and time again in my own personal life. This is a very accurate thing that can happen. And it's in any organization, not just business. I've seen it happen in multiple organizations. Now, the Dilbert principle is a similar but a little bit opposite principle promoted by Scott Adams, the guy who writes the comic strip Dilbert, and that is, quote from Wikipedia, "The Dilbert principle is a concept in management developed by Scott Adams, creator of the comic strip Dilbert, which states that companies tend to systematically promote incompetent employees to management to get them out of the workflow." Now, I've also seen this occur on occasion, but not quite that exactly the same way, but I've actually seen versions of this. So here you go. You have the Peter principle versus the Dilbert principle. Both are a little bit satirical. Both were kind of written and promoted tongue-in-cheek, as it were. But I do believe they do show a very large problem when it comes to promoting and your employees to management or into different positions, moving people around. Or as in the book that I talk about a lot in business, Good to Great, it talks about people are the most important part of your business. And in Good to Great, he has this concept of the bus. The business is the bus, you're the bus driver, you're taking the bus to the right destination. Now, in order to get the bus to the right destination, first of all, you need to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and then you need to get the right people into the right seat on the bus. This is key. And this is where I think the Dilbert principle and the Peter principle come into play. It's trying to find the right seats for the right people on the bus. The whole idea is you need to first of all get the right people on the bus. If you do that, you can avoid the Dilbert principle. Because if someone's just incompetent and they're no good, instead of trying to promote them into a management position to get rid of them, just get rid of them. If you can't change your people is the term. You can't change the person if you can't get them to become competent. If they're a horrible employee, and no matter what you do, you can't get them to improve, then get rid of them. I mean, you have to change them, replace them. Sadly, but that's what you have to do. And perhaps the next episode, I'll talk about firing people. Hopefully, though, if you did the hiring process right, you didn't rush it, you took your time, and you really vetted the person well, then you won't have that problem nearly as often. So, in that respect, quite honestly, while the Dilbert principle is funny, and I've seen it happen where people who are incompetent seem to be promoted into management, quite often, it's not so much to get them out of the workflow, but from my personal experience, it's because while they were decently competent at their job enough so they didn't get fired, they tended to kiss up to upper management and always do things like, I actually had one guy bring flowers to upper management who was a female manager, always talking about how pretty she was and what a great job she was doing, and always doing this type of thing, and got promoted. And quite honestly, I think that's more the cause of the Dilbert principle, where a incompetent employee may not be great at their job, but they're great at self-promotion, and they're great at glad-handing and getting the upper management to like them, and so they're promoted not on skill, but on the basis of being liked. And I think that's the key component to the Dilbert principle. I've also seen where I know one guy who was promoted in a union job, not because he was incompetent, but because he was hyper competent to the point of making everyone else look bad, and they didn't like the fact that he was making them look bad, making them look like they need to work harder, which they probably did. So the upper management said, okay, we can either fire you for doing your job better than everyone else, or we can promote you to management. And so they promoted him to manager instead. Now, he never told me if he was good at being a manager or not. He might have been great at it. But that was a bit of kind of both the Dilbert and the Peter principle, where they promoted someone hyper competent into management. But in this case, they told him directly, we're promoting you into management because you're so competent, you're making everyone else look bad. So they're trying to get him out of the workflow into management because he's hyper competent, not the inverse. Kind of interesting. Anyway, in my experience, though, the Peter principle is far and above the most common that I have seen in all the jobs I've worked, where hyper-competent people in one position get pushed into a higher or a different position that they're not as good at, and they tend to fail. Or even if they don't fail, their competence level goes down and it drives everyone else nuts. Now, in the book, they talk about how a school teacher gets promoted up to the principal, and then it's such a different skill set, they just get wiped out on that. Okay, understood. I've never been a teacher. I've never been a principal. I can't speak for that. But I have worked in sales. And quite honestly, I think this happens in sales way more often than it does even with teachers. Especially because it takes years to become a teacher a principal in a school. However, it doesn't take nearly as long to get promoted into a management position on a sales staff, because quite often a sales team, the organizational hierarchy is a lot more spread out. There's a lot more sales managers than principals, in other words. For example, I worked at a Radio Shack. And at each Radio Shack, they usually had one manager with about 4 to 5 actual employees working for the manager, with one manager in training or assistant manager. They called it assistant manager for a while, then they decided to change it into manager in training, whatever. Semantics, whatever. But the point being, you had one manager, one assistant manager, and 3 salesmen working, on average 2 to 3 salesmen at every Radio Shack. So you had a grand total of about 5 to 6 employees. So opportunities of going from salesperson to manager training to manager was extremely high, because that's the only pull they had to draw from, was from their salespeople to promote into management. That's how that worked. Whereas if you are a teacher and you work in a school, you might have 30 teachers, say 10, even 15 teachers, one vice principal and one principal, and that principal and vice principal could be principal and vice principal for years and years and years. You're not going to have a lot of turnover. So I honestly have seen this in sales positions more often than I have in other positions. Again, I haven't been in a lot of other positions, but here's the thing. I have seen amazing managers in sales. They're amazing sales managers. They're incredibly good at managing a sales team. They're great teachers. They're very great at encouraging people. They're good at getting people to make more sales. They're good at instructing them, helping them, building up the team, so the team sells more as a whole. But the people they're teaching how to sell are better at sales than they are. Matter of fact, my wife was one of these amazing salespeople, and she was working at a Radio Shack. The district manager came in and asked her manager, so who's your best salesperson? He goes, oh, it's Helena. And the district manager was taken aback and said, hey, aren't you supposed to say it's me? You're the manager. You're supposed to be the best salesperson. To which the manager said, no, my job is to manage. I'm the manager. My position is not to sell. It is to manage. So therefore, she's my best salesperson. It's my job to manage the team, the store. And that was a great point. It was his job to manage the salespeople, not be the salesperson. Being able to sell as a manager is a good thing in a sales position, of course. You need to be able to sell at some degree, but that doesn't mean you're the best or a super salesman to be a manager. On the flip side, I have worked for some guys who were nice guys, nothing knocking the guy, who got promoted into management after being in sales for years and being some of the best people in their position in sales, absolutely amazing salesmen, knocking the numbers off the chart every time they do sales. Amazing. But they get knocked up into management and fail horribly because they have no clue on how to manage people. And when it comes to managing people, their idea of managing people is to sell people in their position. Well, what do I mean by that? When you're a salesperson, you're good at befriending people, getting them to trust you, listen to your speech, and then getting them to agree with doing what you're doing, which is fine. Some of these can be used in management. Of course, you need to get people to like you, get people to trust you, and get people to listen to you in management. Of course, those are very key management skills, of course. But when you have a salesperson under you who is struggling to make the sell, you don't need to try to sell them on how to sell. You need to teach them how to sell. You need to be able to look at them and look at the spots where they're struggling, where they're failing, where they're struggling at, and actually address the actual problem. Now, these managers I've had that were great guys who were promoted to management, instead of going, hey, look here, I've been watching you. Here's something where if you change this, perhaps you'll do better. Instead, they said, hey, watch me sell. And they would go and they would sell. Like, see how easy it is. Or they're like, well, you can really sell. I promise you can sell. If you just listen to this, you can sell. Again, their whole idea was to try to sell the person on how to become a better salesman. Now, all these salesmen were on commission, so they did not need to be sold on the idea of needing to get better at sales. They needed to be helped to improve their technique to get more sales. And that was a conflict. And I've seen people moved into management from sales that have this exact same idea where they're so focused on sales that they don't know how to actually build a team, grow a team, and improve the quality of their overall team. I've seen it time and time again in Radio Shack, in other sales positions, when I was working, doing booking timeshare tours. I've seen this over and over and over again where really nice guys, incredible salespeople, are promoted into management because they sell a lot of stuff. But selling a lot of stuff does not necessarily mean you can be a good manager. And on the flip side, you can be a great manager, but a horrible salesperson. It's understandable. So you got to promote people within their own competence. And it's a difficult thing for you to do as a leader, as a manager, because you might have a great salesperson who might also be an amazing manager. And sometimes you can't really tell until you make that leap. And you might want to keep a person as a salesperson because they do an incredible job at sales, but you want to also try to recognize how great they are by giving them a promotion of some sort. But the problem is, if you promote them, you might promote them out of that spot of competence into a spot of lesser or complete incompetence. It's a tricky thing to do, and especially if you're talking about having people come in, especially younger people coming into a entry level position. Because I know if you're running a restaurant, you might have a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid come in and start working for you as a dishwasher. And as they grow up and as they learn how to work hard in that position, you might promote them up to a prep cook to help the cooks. And then maybe you promote them into a cook or promote them into a server or something else. And you're going to want to do that because, of course, just in general, no one ever sits as a dishwasher in a restaurant for very long. That's the entry level, bottom end position. It needs to be done. It doesn't take a lot of competence to do, and it's great for learning how to work hard, etc. So you start them at a dishwasher and you move them up as you observe where their skills lay. So a dishwasher might be showing interest in the food prep, and you can move them that direction. Might be more interested in moving towards serving, etc. So you can move them up in a position. And some positions are like that. They're very basic. Anyone can do them positions. And of course, a skilled person in that position doesn't really matter. You can have the best dishwasher on the planet, and it really doesn't affect your bottom line whatsoever. You can get an unskilled dishwasher, and he will do the job just about as well, and you'll be just as fine. So yeah, you do got to move people up. The problem is, how do you evaluate that person to make sure you're moving him from competence to competence instead of from competence to incompetence? And how do you structure your organization to recognize hyper-competent people that you can't move from that position without moving them into a place where they're not as good? Incredible hard thing to do, quite honestly. And that's just quite often why people get moved up into positions of incompetence as often as possible. And this is very true, like in the military. It's quite often people will complain that when they advance in rank, they advance from being where they're good at, say commanding a submarine or commanding a platoon of men or something along those lines, and they get promoted up to a desk jockey. Drives them crazy, and they may be okay at it, but not great at it. And they're miserable, and then they're not as effective or skilled, and so their bosses are miserable, and it just kind of makes things worse. So the question comes into, how do you avoid both of these principles, the Peter principle and the Dilbert principle? Because sometimes you'll promote someone just because they're the squeaky wheel. You want to get them out of the way because you see they're a nice guy, and you don't want to fire the nice guy, whatever. So you promote them, whatever. So here's my opinion, straight up my opinion. I don't have any data to back this up with, just my experience and from what I see. You need to be observing a person outside of their primary core competency to make the decision on whether to promote them or not. First of all, how would you do that? In my opinion, and from what people I've seen, you can start with taking them in their core competency and then giving them positions of trust and leadership. For example, if you're looking at moving a person from sales into management, give them a smaller leadership task within their current realm of competency, i.e., a salesperson, great salesperson. You might say, okay, hey, we got a new guy here. Why don't you teach this new guy how to sell with you? Now, they're not officially promoted. They're not in a different position, but you're just having it as part of their job to help train a new guy. And part of this is writing these types of things into your key performance indicators, KPIs. You put this in the job description that you might perhaps be helping teach new people. So therefore, they're not, oh, well, if I'm going to be teaching, I should be a training manager. You should pay me more. No, put it into the job description. And you build it in a way where now you can watch the guy who's a salesperson, see if they can actually help train a new guy. How is he doing that? Or maybe put together a small little group, little team effort of some sort, and make them the leader of this little team effort within your sales team and see how they do, how they interact, watch. Create ways to observe them outside of them in customer interactions where the customer just buys. You got to see how they interact with their fellow employees. This also goes back to the testing I talked about, the personality testing. Yeah, sure, you can understand a person's personality, but it might give you a baseline on, well, this person's a great salesperson, but from what I know about his personality type, maybe not even having tests, but people with this type of personality may be great at sales, but maybe a little bit too flighty to be management material. So it's good to look at that and just try to set up a way to evaluate where that person is and then move them up only if and when they show that they are very skilled at doing the management, doing the other jobs that you'd be promoting them into. Or as one place I was at, whenever they promoted someone to a place of leadership, even if they were already in a leader position, a higher leadership position, when they did the promotion to the higher leadership position, it was never a promotion into different responsibilities. It was always a recognition of the responsibilities they already were doing and had. So they were already exhibiting the skills and competency to do the position. They were already doing these things, and all they did was make it official. And I think that's a great way to avoid the Peter principle, is promote people that already exhibit the character traits you're looking for in that position, if they're already exhibiting these positions. Now, won't that leave some of your most competent people stuck in a position for years, making them upset that they're not recognized and that they should be promoted? Yeah, this very well could. And I think the flip side of this is within your organization, again, my opinion on this one, you should set it up so that you can recognize a person with an incredible skill set. You can promote them to some rank, some level of some sort where they get higher pay, more respect, more trust, and all these other things that will keep the motivation there without having to put them into a position where they will fail at. For example, you might have a person come in as a salesman and they're just like a beginner salesman. And then perhaps, this is just a perhaps, you can set up to salesman level 2, level 3, master salesman, whatever. So you can set kind of almost like a military rank within your sales department. And of course, you can have a sales manager who can be a great salesman, but they show management skill. You can move them over. But the sales manager might be paid the same as a top salesman, or paid less than a top salesman, and top salesman gets more because they're paid on commission and they're making more because of their commission. You got to make sure that they understand the position they're in is because that's where they excel at and not because you don't appreciate them. And that's another thing. It's not just giving them position, not just giving them a title, not just giving them more pay, which a top salesperson on commission might make way more money than any of your management team, even your top management level, because they're a great salesperson and making commission. But they do need recognition. They do need you to talk to them, treat them as a person, interact with them, say, hey, I appreciate you. Take the time to write them a note saying, hey, you're doing a great job today. Hey, it's great. Just little things you can do to help encourage them to realize that you appreciate what they're doing, and the reason they're in that position is because they're the best at it. Now, this was not exactly a Peter Principle moment, but I had a moment like similar to this when I was working at the arcade with Jason Sinclair, and I had just recently been promoted up to a lead arcade attendant. Now, the structure was you had the arcade attendants, you had a part-time lead, you had a full-time lead, you had the supervisor, then you had the department manager that was over the entire department that really came down to the arcade. And the lead position was very much coveted because A, of course, you were in charge, but more importantly, you got paid more. The lead positions paid more. And so I got promoted into the lead position, and one of the first things I realized is when we got busy, we had to move different people into different positions where they were the best at during the day. Now, one of my best friends, I've talked about him before, Dave, he was my roommate. And now we were both working at the same place at the same time, oftentimes at the same shift, and we were roommates. We saw each other a whole awful lot, and it did lead to some sparks and conflict from time to time because, yeah, if you're not married to somebody and you're living with them that much, it can get intense. Now, it just happened that way. But then, to make things worse, I got promoted into a position over him because I had been there a lot longer. And so, been there a lot longer, knew what to do. And I also liked my friend Dave. Obviously, he's one of my best friends to this day. And he was also one of my hyper competent employees. Matter of fact, he did eventually get promoted to lead as well because of his pure competence. And he was a pretty decent lead as well. But being one of my most competent employees, he got really mad at me one day after work, and he's like, "Why are you picking on me?" I'm like, "What do you mean? You're always telling me what to do. You tell me what to do more than the other people. Why do you pick on me? You're always telling me to go here, do that, do this, do that, and you're telling me, I've noticed, you single me out. You send me all over the place. Every time there's a problem, you send me over to this place, to this place. You're always telling me what to do. The other people you don't even bother have as much. Why are you doing it? Why are you picking on me?" The reason I did this was because of his high competence. And again, it wasn't a Peter Principle thing, but because I realized he was competent. And what I did was I had to put the competent person into the places I need competent people. And the people who were not competent, I did not work. So what I told him was this. I asked him, I said, "Hey, Dave, when there's a huge line at the counter and you have all these kids picking all these items," he understood, "when you're working the counter, tell me something, Dave. How long does it take you to clear that line?" He goes, 5-10 minutes. Okay. So, Dave, if there's 5 games broken all at once, how long does it take you to fix it? 5-10 minutes, maybe 15. Okay. Any of these places I put you, how long does it take you to fix any of these places? Probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Okay. How long does it take so and so? An hour. Exactly. You're the person I put into position because you're the best person to do those jobs. That's why. Another similar situation, another guy, after I got promoted, I was making him do all this other little jobs that were kind of busy work jobs, but important to do, but they were not anything that was really exciting to do. For example, waxing the air hockey table. You have to do it just perfectly, otherwise you can ruin it, A, but B, it's also needed, otherwise the puck doesn't slide. You need to get it done right. And I told him to go wax this and then go clean this game properly and all these other little maintenance things that don't usually get done. And not usually his job. And he complained about it. He's like, "Why are you doing all this? Why are you making me do this?" And I had to explain to him. I said, "This is how it goes. Today, it's a slow day. We only have like 5 customers in here. I've been told by management, upper management, that if we don't have a lot of customers and I don't have a lot of work for you, I have to send you home and you don't get to work the rest of your shift or get paid. You're also one of the very few people that work here that know how to do these jobs, then I can keep you here being paid, doing a job that you're skilled at because you know how to do it and you're one of the few people that are competent enough to do this. And so that's why I'm doing this." Now, the reason I said both these stories is this. Here's 2 people. Now, this other kid never got promoted to lead. My friend Dave did. But the point being is, here's 2 people that are very competent at their jobs, were not in a position to be promoted into a leadership position at that time, couldn't just promote them, but they felt underappreciated for all the work they were doing. Now, granted, that's partly because I had just been promoted and they were that little leadership struggle, and I might revisit this, but all it took was me talking to them and explaining that I was not picking on them, I was helping them out, and I was showing my incredible trust and confidence in them. And with that, the whole situation changed. Me and my roommate had less fights. He never brought it up again. He completely understood. And actually, after that, he worked even harder for me which was amazing. He worked very hard before just because he's a hardworking guy. When I'd ask him to do something after that conversation, immediately jump to it and get it done even better, because he knew that the reason I was relying on him wasn't because he was my friend, wasn't because I didn't like him, but it was because he knew what he was doing. And he actually looked around and saw that I was sticking the most competent people in the positions of their best strength in the busiest parts of the day, because I needed to organize the staff to be most efficient. And then the other kid, once he realized I was making him money and saving him money, and explained that I was having him do these things not because I was picking on him, but because he was skilled at these jobs, his attitude also changed, and he became very loyal to my instruction. They both did, because I recognized their skills. And oftentimes, when it comes to the Peter principle, when it comes to having a person who might feel underappreciated because they're not getting a promotion, if you can explain that I can't promote you at a sales position because you'll make less money. For example, you're now making commission. If I promote you up to a sales manager, you're going to lose half your salary. That might make a difference. Encourage people. Show them how important they are. Make sure they're being paid well for the position. Make sure that a jump to a different position does not necessarily mean a jump in pay. This is, in my opinion, how you would structure your organization around avoiding having this happen. You got to try to avoid it, because in the Peter principle, the end is the entire organization is filled with completely incompetent people, because only incompetent people, because all the people have been moved into incompetent positions, and just ruins it. So again, you have to be careful about putting the people in the right seat on the bus. And again, these are not bad people. The problem is these are your most amazing people in each position. They're the best at what they do in their position. But if you move them to somewhere where they're not good at, you can set them up for failure. And with one last note, when I worked at the casino, the one general manager that we had that was universally despised, even hated by some people. I just didn't like him. I didn't really hate him, but the most incompetent manager, one of the ones I can remember that we had, he started off as an accountant with no people skills, and he somehow got promoted to the general manager of the casino. And he dealt with people and dealt with the casino as an accountant with no people skills. And it was very clear. And he failed. Again, prime example of the Peter principle, moving someone up into a bad position. And he was eventually fired because he was not good at it. And I also saw him go on to another casino. Matter of fact, there was a short little TV series with him at the top as a casino manager somehow. And he was universally disliked there because, again, an accountant, it may be great at numbers, but not be great at people. And a great salesperson shouldn't be an accountant quite often because they might be great at people, but horrible at numbers. Again, you put a person into the position where they're strong and you build them up in that position. You make sure that's the best spot. You might have a competent salesman who turns out to be an amazing manager. You might have a competent salesman who's great at something else, like building teams, like marketing. That's another thing. Sales and marketing, completely different. I'm going to have to talk about that in a future episode. It's late. Long episode today. Sorry about that. But just as the last thought, a sales position and a marketing position are two different things, which is something I learned the hard way when I launched off on my own. I said, I'm great at sales. I've managed stores. I can do this, no problem. And turns out marketing is much different than sales. So that's for another episode. Anyway, y'all have a good day. Have a great time. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye. If you found value in this content, please leave a comment and give us a 5-star rating on whichever podcast platform you use. We're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google, and most other podcast platforms. If you would like to support us, you can check out our sponsor links, or if you'd like to support us directly, you can donate or join our membership program at buymeacoffee.com/bootstrap. Of course, it really helps when you share these podcasts with your friends as well. If you'd like to interact with me and other bootstrappers and leaders, you can join us over at our O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast Facebook group. You have been listening to the O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast, an Atheoz Business Solutions podcast. For a companion podcast, the Atheoz Business Podcast, which is hosted by Jason St. Clair, past episodes and related blogs, please check out our website at www.atheoz.com, which is at www.atheoz.com or theoz.com. Until next time, I have been your friendly neighborhood entrepreneur, Isaiah O'Connor.